Good afternoon, everyone in Ann Arbor, and those of you who are watching on Zoom. I'm Steve Ratner. I'm a law professor at the University of Michigan Law School, and I'm also the faculty director of the Donia Human Rights Center. Welcome to our February event. This is the fifth of our monthly events that we have had since we got started in September of this year. Our lecture and event for today, the Israeli Third Republic, Netanyahuism as a new phase in Israeli civil rights and politics, to be given by Professor Ghanem with commentary by Yali Hashash. I'm going to just reiterate some of the ground rules we have for our events here. We, of course, protect the right of free speech. Protesters have a right to express their opposition in appropriate ways, but they must not interfere unduly with the communications between the speaker and the audience. And I hope I don't have to have any further issues to do with that today. But I'm delighted to have both of you here. Welcome to Ann Arbor. I know you're both here for just the year, and we're delighted to have this. And I want to thank Mark Tesler for having put this idea in both Assad and my head, and it's wonderful to see it come to fruition. So let me first introduce Yali Hashash. Dr. Hashash is a Mizrahi queer feminist scholar whose research interests include the social history of the 19th and 20th century Palestine and the Middle East, poverty, gender, nationalism, ethnicity, you okay here?
Recording in progress.
Are we? No, we're still getting an echo. Okay. Stand by. Okay, I think we're better now. Good. So I was saying she's her interests include social history of the 19th and 20th century Palestine, among other issues. She's the founder and head of gender and criminology program at Or Yehuda College and a member of the Haifa Feminist Research Center, Isha Leisha. Her book, Whose Daughter Are You? Ways of Speaking Mizrahi Feminism was published last year, and she is a Frankel Institute Fellow at the university this year at the Frankel Center on the project Mizrahi Feminism Between Class, Religion, and Nationalism. Yali, I'm delighted to welcome you, and of course Assad as well, and I look forward to a lively discussion today. So thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you very much, and I'm honored to be here as a respondent to Professor Ghanem's talk. Professor Assad Ghanem is a lecturer at the School of Political Science in the University of Haifa. Currently, he's a visiting professor at the Frankel Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Michigan. His research agenda and work has explored the legal, institutional, and political conditions in ethnic states, democratization in the Middle East, fundamentalism, Palestinian political orientations, the political structure of the Palestinian national movement, and the future of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. His recent books are Palestinians in Israel, The Politics of Faith After Oslo, with Mohanad Mustafa, Israel in the Oslo Era, Prospects for Conflict and Reconciliation with the Palestinians, with Mohanad Mustafa and Salim Breik, and The Palestinian Question After Oslo. Professor Ghanem.
Should I stand there?
Probably.
That's okay if I stand there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm going to control my presentation from here. I'm not going to let anybody control me for the next 30 minutes. Okay. So first, please, thank you, Steve. I want first to thank Mark for facilitating this, Mark Tesler, of course, for facilitating this event. Thank you. And of course, I want to thank Steve Ratner for the invitation, Professor Steve Ratner. Thank you for inviting me to this lecture. I want to thank Professor Yali Hashash for accepting the invitation to be a commentator, and I want to thank Natasha, for facilitating the whole meeting. I will go right away to my main argument because I've been learned that I have only 30 minutes and then they will stop me. So I'm going to use, I hope, effectively my 30 minutes. So I'm going to speak basically, it's a long article, a long chapter, and it is a book project. I hope that I will succeed to do part of it while I am here around. But I gave you only the short version, and if you need more, I will be happy to send you my full version of the lecture. So it is up to you. If you want to suffer more, just ask me to send you the longer. How this works? This work? This work? No? 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 It's going back? Yeah. This is the way. Okay. So I'm going to refer to four. I want to thank you, Shahar, also, for your help facilitating my visit here. So I'm going to speak about four main questions in this short lecture. The first one, directly, what do I mean by the term Israeli Third Republic? I will refer to a discussion that I already involved with my colleagues, at least two of them from Ben Gurion University, so they are caring about the term republic, and I want to explain why I'm using the term republic. And secondly, I want to explain the new political situation in Israel, which I consider as the dominant bloc system. Third, I want to speak how Israel related to comparative cases in the world, and there is a lot to learn from other cases in the world. And fourth, how Netanyahu or the Netanyahunism is in past, present, and the future planned steps will violate human rights in general and citizen rights in particular, and what changes and what is there anticipated, is there is any anticipated consequences for Netanyahu power in Israel. So these are the four questions that I am going to refer to it. And I will start with the three questions briefly because I am getting a warning from Steve that I should stick and speak about human rights violations. So I'm right. I'm not going to. So I'm going to go directly as possible to the fourth part of my lecture. What do I mean by the Third Republic, and why I'm using the word republic? Usually, in many liberal scholars, the mean republics mean democracy, and liberal democracy in particular. This is not true. This is not the right definition of republic. Republic is non-monarchy, and it can be communist republic, authoritarian republic like totalitarian republic of Saddam Hussein, and of course of this guy from North Korea, and America is a republic, and France is a republic, and Israel is a republic. It doesn't do anything with the content of the republic. It is a political frame which is not non-monarchy. So this is, I hope that it is very clear, and this is why I think that the term republic fits the Israeli case. I'm using a previous work of Professor Asher Aryan, who wrote a book in '96 about Israeli Second Republic, where he claimed that Israel, after Begin came to power in '77, and especially in the '90s and the '80s, Israel turned to be the Second Republic. What is the meaning of Second Republic? It's a big, huge topic. But I mean by that Israel, and he meant by that Israel was found by this guy, by Ben Gurion. And Ben Gurion he declared the establishment of Israel. He conducted the Palestinian, let them go out or push them out from their homeland, the expulsion of the Palestinians, and then he created the main institutions of Israel, what Israel is all about, as we know it since then. He created the political, the army, he exempted religious groups from serving in the army, and he created the military government over Arab citizens in Israel, etc., etc. It's a long story, but I'm not going to go through it because it is well known, and you can learn about it from different resources. Then came the Second Republic to Israel. Actually, I have in the long version of my articles, I have full description what I mean by First Republic, but I'm not going to go all through it. Then came the time for the Second Republic in Israel. What is the Second Republic? It started with Begin when he came to power in 1977, when Israeli vote differently than before, bring the right wing and the revisionist stream to Israeli power. It was started with Begin, the guy with the glasses, and then he continued. He was elected again in 81, and then he left power. Since then, until 2009, every election brings the opponent to those in power to power in Israel. So every 4 or less, I mean, we usually have election in Israel for less than 3 years. So one, it was the Likud, and the other time was the Labour. Between 84 and, as we know, and 92, there was a national unity government in Israel because they didn't succeed to produce one-side government in Israel. What is important for this lecture is the argument of Asher Aryan that the balance of power between right and left facilitate some kind of compromises in Israel. This brings Israel internally to build the basic institutionalization of the Israeli constitution, mainly the human dignity law in Israel, and the activization of the Supreme Court in the public sphere of Israel, headed by Aharon Barak, the main figure of the Israeli Supreme Court. And secondly, it facilitates the external peace processes between Israel and Egypt, Lebanon, that was collapsed, of course, and then Palestinians, Jordan, and all the story. So in this period of time, every time there was a change of political dominant party in the government of Israel. Now, and this is very short. I mean, I can elaborate in that. I mean, those who are aware of Israel's situation can elaborate in this issue. But these are the main figures. You can count here also Sharon and Olmert and the old Bibi Netanyahu, etc., etc. But and of course Ehud Barak. But I'm going to make it very, very short. And then we start with this guy, Benjamin Netanyahu. He is the initiator and the main political figure in the Israeli Third Republic. So Benjamin Netanyahu, he stayed in the sideline of power from 2009 until from 1999 until 2009. He stayed in sideline, and then he came back to be the new prime minister in 2009. What is his main project? Is first of all to continue and strengthen the Jewish hegemony, not over Israel, but over Eretz Israel, over Palestine. This is one of his major projects. And second is facilitating the presence of anti-democratic values in Israeli society. So he's the guy who facilitates the anti-Arab public views in the Israeli public. And of course, he's one behind Ben Gvir lately, and he gave the legitimacy for Ben Gvir to come back after under Shamir was refused to accept Kach and Kahana, and he pushed them out of the political situation or political arena in Israel. So this is very important to understand. And third, he's the man behind strengthening the Jewish conservative culture in the public sphere in Israel, not regarding Palestinians, but regarding other Israelis. So he's the one behind changing educational curriculum since 2008, controlling the media, and of course Judaization or religiousation of the public sphere in Israel. There are many works in this regard. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but you can of course see them in different places. And no, this is and he is of course the one behind closing the option for two-state solution. I'm totally aware that the one that distract the option of two-state solution is Ehud Barak. He's the one, and then Sharon after him. But the guy who closed the door totally, 100% for the two-state solution is Benjamin Netanyahu, and of course he is also the one that changing the political culture among the Jewish public. I mean, until 2 decades, 3 decades, it's very difficult to imagine that an Israeli prime minister will be elected, although he has a charge for corruption. And there is an Israeli prime minister who left power because he was accused of corruption because they found in his wife account in America, I don't know how many dollars, but it's not really a serious matter. He left power, Rabin. And this is now, for sure, people know that he's corrupted. I mean, at least he's charged of corruption and they get voting for him. So he changed also the Israeli public culture in this regard. Of course, he distracted the Israeli left. I mean, this is the guy who made it clear that the left is not going to come to power in the coming years. So he just destroyed the Israeli left. There are many other reasons behind the destruction of the left. But there is one reason. It is Benjamin Netanyahu who's behind this destruction. In every election since 2009, there is an Israeli left center, Palestinian, Arab, American, public concept that Netanyahu is going to lose the power. I mean, in every election in the last 10 years. And in every election he came after election, he's much stronger than he expected. Not whose opponent to him, but he expected, in last election, he expected that he's going to gain 61 seats out of 120. And he gained 64 seats. So he's gaining more power than he himself expected. And this is very important to understand this situation. The question is why? I'm using the term that was invented by Duverger, the French. In his book, he promoted the idea of dominant party. What is dominant party? There is a lot of literature. This is a political party with 6 characteristics. It receives the larger number of votes. It remains in power for a few period after elections. And it is the party copies and central position in the formation of the government coalition. It is the persistent pursuit of power is the central, the looking for being in power is the main agenda for the party, and the dominant party exists in political system where it's those who compete with it are very small parties. So when referring to this is by a book by Chris Templeman. We mean by that such parties like of course Mapai in Israel between 48 and 77. It was a dominant political party. But I can refer here to other cases in the world, like the case of dominant party in dominant party of the ANC in South Africa, Liberal Democratic Party in Japan, Congress Party in India, and the AKP in Turkey. So there are different other examples of dominant party, and how these parties accede to power. This is by different paths, by different ways, but this is not the time to come. So now I want to refer to the Likud. Likud is still not the dominant party in Israel. It is very small compared to Mapai in the 50s and the 60s. Now it has 31 seats in the Knesset. It's 1/4 of the Israeli seats. Let's remember that the Mapai party gained in 56 seats out of 61 that needs for coalition. So it was huge, a huge party. And beside the fact that it is still very, compared to Mapai, small party, the Likud still meets, it is very, as I said, it is very, the achievements are very limited. And secondly, it still faces a lot of opposition in the Israeli academia, in the Israeli judicial branch, in the Israeli media, in the Israeli elites. Look what happened now in Israel. So they are facing real challenge. It's not a game. It's real challenge that faces Israel. What I am arguing here, that what we have in Israel is the right-wing bloc. So what is the right-wing bloc? Is the bloc where the whole, which is very important in Israel, government came to power because they succeed to make a coalition. So historically, there was the coalition of Mapai and the coalition of the Likud. And when they didn't succeed, they made a unity, the governmental unity in Israel. Now, what happened lately, that the Likud became very important. It is the largest party in Israel. But secondly, he have allies that mostly they are right-wing than the Likud. So they cannot make coalition with the left. The only option for them is the Likud. I mean by that, religious parties. Just remember, in 92, Shas was part of Rabin government. Now Shas, before every election, they declared that the only option for them is to support Benjamin Netanyahu. That's true for the religious national stream, and that's true for the Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox parties, Yahdut HaTorah. So he's now the Likud is a very dominant power, part of the dominant bloc, which means that we have two levels of dominance, one in the state level and one in the bloc level. So, and here I'm trying to explain to you what do I mean by this. This is to say that the strongest bloc in Israel is the Likud and the right. Secondly, the Likud is the only party that can produce normal government in Israel. Just before a few months, we had a government in Israel between Bennett and Lapid with support of Arab party. This is not normal. This is not going to work. And I keep explaining to my friends, this is not going to work. And they keep saying, no, it will work. It's not normal to work. So the only possible option in Israel is the right wing, led by the Likud. And of course, the Likud is trying to change, as I said before, the whole Israeli landscape, the whole Israeli cultural, political, social landscape in Israel. So we are now entering a new era. And Netanyahu, if you read his book, I think it's very clear. He's having the whole agenda. It's not that only Sarah behind him. He's a guy is a serious guy. This is what I mean by this. And fourth, if you read sociologically the Israeli, I made this in the book. We went with my friend and we read the Israeli social clusters, the 10 clusters in Israel. And we found the Likud getting support from all clusters, including the Arabs, with 2 seats. This is the only party in Israel that get power from all Israeli sectors, social sectors, and of course, national sectors and ethnic sectors. This is very important. This is the only party that represents the Israeli people, really. The Lapid, he gained from certain segments of the community. The Arabs, only from Arabs. The religious, only from religious parties. Only the Likud get power and support from all Israeli segments. And as I said before, this is not a new, but this is a historical move of the religious parties from being partners with the Mapai in the 50s and the 60s, and now they are only partners with with the Likud. There are certain explanation behind what happened to Israel society that bring this right wing to power. These are the four explanations in my view. I'm going to go. What is the time limit?
It's 5:30.
So I have another 20 minutes? 10 minutes. Okay. Sectarian politics in Israel after Oslo is very important. The change of the way that Israeli select its government. There was a change in '96, and then Netanyahu was elected directly by the people. This facilitates for many people to vote for their own sectarian party from one hand and to vote for the prime minister office in the other hand. Let's bring then Shas to 17 seats. This is why Shas gained then 60, because people get to vote. And this is also behind the enlargement of Arab parties in Israel, the sectarian politics. This is one. And these sectors that were discriminated under the Mapai governments in the 50s, like the Arab of Tuah, the Mizrahim, and the religious, and of course later the Russian immigrants, all of them except the Arabs are in the majority of them are in the right side of Israeli politics. So this is what one explanation why, and I believe in that. I think, contrary to many of my friends that think that it is the social status that explain that. No, I think the ethnic affiliation is very important to explain who vote for whom. If you go to religious Israeli religious communities, they vote for religious parties. If you go to the Arabs, they vote for Arab parties. If you go to the Mizrahim, they vote for the Likud and for Shas, and etc., etc. I mean the majority, but this is also something. The second one is the intensification of the conflict, Palestinian national movement in Palestine and Jews in Palestine. There is intensification of the conflict. I will go forward if you ask me. The politics of fear by Netanyahu and the right, I mean, he's trying all time to promote the fear in the public sphere from Arabs, from Muslims, from Palestinians, etc. And of course, the weakness of the left. There is no leadership in the left. I mean, now, who's the leader in the left? There is no leader in the left. So I'm trying to put it in a general framework. Then I use the term populism. I know in America you use populism for right and left. In Europe, we use it for right usually. And that's the case in the Israeli case. So it is something about the meeting between right politics and populism. And I recommend for you these two books. They are very important, very short books. One of them 120 pages of Muller, and the other one of Kass is 150 pages. And they summarize the whole literature about populism, and they also promote the idea of what is the meaning of populism. So I'm arguing that Israel is not alone. I mean, I know that there are uniqueness in every case. But we as a political scientists, as social scientists, the essence of our science is to make comparisons. So I'm trying to look about certain cases that I can make a comparison with them. Look about this senior official in Hungary says Netanyahu and Orban belong to the same political family. Look here, Orban says Israel and Hungary are models of successful conservative communities. So these people try to say we share with Netanyahu certain things and you should care about it. Thus, this is the group, the family of Benjamin Netanyahu. So you can, of course, they are not the same. There is difference between Trump and Netanyahu. There is difference between Polisario and Netanyahu. There is difference between Orban. But this is the whole family of Netanyahu that I'm going to explain the main feature of it. There is another report by Tony Blair Institute for Global Peace, and he's mentioning that there was in 94 cases of populist in power, and now we have 11 rulers, populist leaders in power. In such regimes, there is very important in populist regimes, the agent, the main actor is very important. The leader is very important to the regime, to the populist agenda. So that's true for all cases that I mentioned, but it is also the case in Israel, as we'll show. What is the difference between Israel and the other cases? The main difference between Israel and the other cases is that Israel conducts occupation for more than 50 years over citizens, not citizens, Palestinian inhabitants who lack any political rights. This is make it much more difficult kind of populism. This is much extreme case of populism in our case, and I will refer to it in a minute. What are the 6 main features of charismatic of populist case in Israel? First of all, the charismatic leader. I mean, in every populist case, you need somebody who has the ability to control the others, to control the supporters, and to gain support from the others. So I think that this is the case of Benjamin Netanyahu. If you read his books, I mean, I'm now reading his books. This guy, he knows where he's going. It is, I mean, contrary to many liberal Israelis that claim usually that it is Sarah power, it is his son power. No, this guy was raised to be the leader of the Jewish people, not only the leader of Israel, the leader of the Jewish people. In his book, I found it. He says that he was offered in '88 to stay in America and to be the leader of the Jewish agency. He said, no, I'm going to control Israel and then I will control all the Jewish people. He's in his book. You can go and check if I'm right. So this is one. And you see, in these cases, of course, propaganda and disruption of facts and inventing history is legitimate. So he said just before 2 years that Mufti Husseini, he's convinced Hitler to conduct the Holocaust. And then he retreated, he came back. But now he says that the Arabs expelled the Jews from the land of Israel, which is, it's crazy to see it in the modern world. But I mean, he thinks that in reinventing the history is something legitimate, and this is not only his case. And secondly, he's of course struggle against elites and government institutions and opponent, and portray them as striving against the interest of the homeland. He's well known in that. I mean, I'm having this case that when he was in '99, he was sitting beside Kaduri in a general meeting, open man, and he was catched by saying that to the Kaduri, Rabbi, you see, and she has small. The leftist people, they forget what is a Jew, what's being a Jew. So he started to insult him against the Jewish left, and he was catched by that. And this is, of course, now when Sa'ar, he's from the Likud, he left the Likud, he started during the last election, started saying that he's not loyal to the nation, if you remember, in last election. So he's one that struggled against elite. The third thing is controlling the media. So this is very important in Netanyahu agenda. Since the beginning, I mean, since he came back to Israel, maybe before. I mean, if you remember, if you read his books, you read about what he did while he was representing Israel in the UN. And he wasn't hesitating to invent false truths in order to present the Israel as human, as not killing Palestinians, etc., etc. And then you can refer to his trial. I mean, now 2 cases. He's now in court for 3 cases of corruption. 2 of them are related to controlling the media. He's trying to convince Moses, the Yediot Ahronot, to invent positive news for him and for his family. And then he was trying to convince this guy, who is the controller of Walla, one of the important websites in Israel, public sphere. So I'm going to move. So this is also something it is not just from lately, and this is also something that gives the story of Netanyahu, how he's trying to kill the Israeli news. This guy, he just new elected, and he has a new bills in order to limit the ability to get sources for news, and bad news fears grow in Israel public broadcast, and this is also another project. He just retreated last week, but this is one of his long-term project to close the Israeli general broadcast, etc. And the other one, the most important maybe one, is subordinating the judicial to the executive and striving to legally legislative change that fit the leader vision. And here are the cases. Already, this is something, of course, this is mainly from Haaretz, but it is true. I mean, this is a story that was leaked from official Israeli document. And this is the project of Netanyahu regarding the judicial. It contains 3 steps. One is to main aim the governmental control over the judiciary, main components, legalizing the override provision is the provision that gives the government the ability to have a law which was rejected by the Israeli Supreme Court. And this is going to be, and now they discussed it yesterday, the law. 5 minutes, okay. And the strengthening the power of government coalition over judiciary by in the committee that appoint judge. The case now is that we have some kind of equal power between judge and law people and politicians, and this is what they are looking for, is to have 3/3 for the politicians in the committee and only one quarter for judiciary to be in the committee who decide who will be elected as a judge in Israel. This is one, quickly. And secondly, the second phase of Netanyahu is, of course, the basic law on legislation and repeal of the basic law of human rights. The idea is to bring the human rights law that were the basis of for the Supreme Court to reject any law that contradicts human rights in Israel, and they succeed to, in 22 cases, to cancel laws by the Knesset. Now the idea is to cancel the ability of the Supreme Court to have the power to cancel any Israeli legislation that contradicts purely the human rights concept. And the third, of course, is to legitimize and narrowing the right of standing, the right of Israelis to stand for court if they have their own personal case, and this is also very important. And the fourth thing is to splitting the role of the Attorney General in Israel, and to have the authority by the government to hire then or attorneys to protect the Prime Minister and the ministers in front of the case. And here are these attorney generals, the previous one and the current one says this is Netanyahu because of his birth. I don't agree with them. This is not because of personal Netanyahu only. This is also related to his political ideological agenda. But this is also relevant because these are now, she's in office still, and she's that Netanyahu is doing all what he's doing because he wants to intervene in the judicial system that related to his own case. So this is, and this is also for something from the fall. Here we come, the reduction of civil rights, mainly regarding the freedom of association and attack against civil society and organizations. Of course, as the leader want, here you can see some cases of that are now we get to this point. This guy who's we call it LGBTQ, and he goes publicly against it. He's now going to be appointed as responsible for 80 educational projects in Israeli public sphere. You know, Israel is more or less like it's half of New York. So I mean, from population-wise. So he's going to be responsible for 80 projects and to promote them in the public sphere. Look what is going to be when it comes. And this is also something about him. He's continue with his propaganda against certain communities in Israel, and he's getting, of course, the support. He's a minister in Prime Minister office, so he get much power, and he's very close to Benjamin Netanyahu in office. I'm just want to move to the next cases. I think that it is very clear that we have now. This is what happened. It's just last week. the committee, I don't know, it is the educational committee in the Knesset. They invited a professor from Ben Gurion because he gave a lecture like me here about the new governmental plan to change the whole structure of judicial authority in Israel, and he was invited to a hearing, and he didn't show up. But this is also show you something about what is going on in Israel. This is in Hebrew is the Minister of Education. He says nobody can enter to the schools, any school, without my permission. He wants to get control over every school in Israel. And of course, the sixth feature of populist leader is using power against domestic enemies and foreign enemies. If you review the Benjamin Netanyahu, and here are a few examples of his declarations against Arab citizens of Israel, not only Palestinians in the West Bank. He says, Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is not the state of all citizens. He's not the state of Israel citizens, Arab citizens. And of course, the one he defending the nation, he's the promoter behind the nation state law, and he says Arabs, including Arab citizens, they have another 22 states, meaning they can leave if they want. This is the Jewish state only. Of course, this is well known. So this is the exclusion of the others who are not considered the part of the. Here I'm come only to my concluding. 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes. I will finish with it. Here, what is important in my view. Now, I mean, in my lectures about the one-state solution in the last since '96. Every lecture, there is one that come up, stand up and say, what you all are going to call this one state? I said, never mind. You can call it Israel, Palestine, Israel and Palestine, Palestine and Israel. There are certain states in the world like Egypt. They have two names, the Arab Republic and Egypt. There are other cases in Africa. So I don't mind about the symbolic thing. Let's go to the context. If we speak about the one state reality, then the most important missing point that 50% of population in Palestine, Israel, who are affected badly, they will be harmed by Israeli legislations. They are the Palestinians, and they are absent from the whole discussion in the Israeli landscape. And this is not only because of the Jews, the Israeli side. It's also because Palestinians are very weak. I mean, the Palestinian community is very weak because of many reasons. I'm not going to go all over the discriminations that will be how Arabs in Israel will be affected and how Palestinians will be affected by this new Israeli changes. But this you can see them in Adala website if you are interested. And of course, this is very important. So already Palestinians are affected negatively. If you hear the news from Jerusalem, from the West Bank, Judaization of the public sphere is the one item, the first item in the new Israel agenda. This is also going to harm Palestinian life. And of course, you will take a look into this guy, Ben Gvir, who is the Minister of Policing in Israel, and he is going to, he's get the issue, the thing that was issued, that he's going to have a new private police in Israel. I mean, not in private for him, but something that will carry on in controlling Arabs in Israel. And of course, this is something from East Jerusalem, where these three guys, or at least three of them, they are striving to demolish Arab villages, including in Khan al-Ahmar, which is already declared that they are going to conduct it. So we are now in a situation where at least the majority that will be affected negatively by Israeli new initiatives, I mean Palestinians and 1/3 of the Israeli Jews. So the majority of those 2/3 are Palestinians, and they are excluded totally. This is not only, as I said before, something to do with the Israeli, which is partially true. I mean, this is also something to think about, but of course they are excluded. And when it comes to the what to do and how to do, of course we can think about Israeli internal center that have already initiated demonstrations against Netanyahu, and they are succeeding to make some kind of delay. And of course, they exclude Palestinians, but of course, you can think about the economic sector that have major power in Israel, and Netanyahu is very sensitive to the Israeli economic sector. And of course, there are warnings about the economic situation in Israel. And you have the international community, which have some power and can affect somehow what is going on in Israel. And of course, the missing element, the Palestinians, and the way that Palestinians can be active, which is something to think about. I think that it is sad and it is tragic that Palestinians in Israel and in the West Bank are very, very quiet. They are not active at all opposing Netanyahu, which will affect them. I know that the current situation affects them badly, but the new situation in Israel will affect much badly them. And I'm sorry that I'm really frustrated because they are not taking real measures in order to push forward in the international as well as in the local. Thank you.
For this fascinating lecture and for this very sad lecture also. We do live in a very sad time. There's so many points from which I can address your talk. I'm not a social scientist, I'm not a political scientist, I'm a historian. So I will try to give more perspectives to the things that you've already mentioned. First, I want to say that I really love the idea of the dominant bloc, and I think it works. I think it's a good argument. But I want to suggest this. Benjamin Netanyahu as a figure, he's everything you said. Like, I don't have any argument with anything that you said. What I want to suggest is that his personality, his ideology, his actions are part of a global movement, not only of populist leaders, but a very specific movement that is a Christian evangelical movement that waged a war on Islam. And you can see that Netanyahu gained his power through, like before he became prime minister for the second time, he had two ways of gaining power. He was the foreign minister and he was the treasury minister. And in both cases, he aligned with neoliberal power and he aligned with evangelical power. And when you think about it, even to call him the leader of the Jewish people, even that I would question that. Because right now his policy, and it has been like that for a long time, his policy is to completely discount American Jewry unless it is Republican. And for him, anything that he wants to gain from the American administration, he would do it through evangelical power. And you can see him running around the world, making alliances with leaders who were elected through evangelical power as well. And you can see, when you talk about the politics of fear, that politics of fear is very much targeting Muslims. It's not even targeting Arabs. It's targeting Islam more than it is relating to nationalism. Of course, often they converge, but the idea that Islam is a danger, and he takes the rhetoric of 9/11 and he uses it to gain more power in Israel, but also to strengthen his position in the world as a leader of anti-terror and therefore anti-Islam fighter. Even when you think about the dominant bloc, I think one of the reasons that this concept works is that so many of the Likud members who vote for the list of the Knesset members, so many of them don't even vote for Likud. They are there, like 10% of Likud members are voting for other parties. And another 26%, according to one of the surveys, are not sure that they will vote Likud, because there's been such a huge effort of the settlers to gain power through the Likud and to have the Likud really be a representative of the settler power. And so the idea of the bloc really works because you have Likud and then you have the religious Orthodox Zionists and you have all other kind of messianic powers that join forces with Likud, but they're really all representing the same, what seems like a majority, but really is a minority of Israeli society, which is the settler community. And the settler community is about 500,000 people. Now, having said that, I would even argue with you from the other point and say that the majority of Jews are right-wing. If they're Ashkenazi or Mizrahi or religious or secular, hardly anyone is left because the left in Israel is right-wing. When the left comes to power, the first thing they do is attack Gaza or Jenin, or they always use military in order to exert their power. So it's not like there is any real left group in Israel. And even the protesters now in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, the large majority of them are standing with Israeli flags as if we're going to declare a new state called Israel. And the whole nationalistic idea appeals to them even more than any idea of being left. So people may call themselves left, but really Israel doesn't have a very clear left-wing community. Another point that I want to mention is that even though these settlers are such a minority in terms of like there are only 500,000 people in Israel, they have like mission stations in every city in Israel. And through those mission stations, they're doing what evangelicals are doing all around the world, right-wing evangelicals. They're putting Jews and Arabs against each other, and mostly Jews and Muslims against each other. Like even in Haifa, which more or less, relatively is, well, it's kind of almost the sanest place in Israel. And even in Haifa, where the Palestinian citizens are so dominant in the city, and even though they're a minority, it's very clear that Haifa is an Arab-Jewish city, even though it's divided. But you have communities that work together. You have communities that share a life together, even though many live in segregation. Even in Haifa, you have a mission station of the settlers who are trying to put Jews and Muslims against each other. And which I just got to the mail a few weeks ago, there's a tour in Haifa saying from a mixed city to a Hebrew city, מעיר מעורבת לעיר עברית, which is an initiative from that mission station. So all these people, all these mission stations, all these very powerful settler ability to translate their ideology into politics, that is funded. And it's funded with huge amounts of money by evangelical Christian right-wing money. And maybe that can mean that you were asking at the end of the lecture and at the end of your presentation about ways out of this. And I agree completely that without having a real conversation, Palestinians and Jews together, there is absolutely no way out. There's no future. There's definitely not, like, you can't see any Jewish future in Israel unless you have that conversation and unless you have ways of living together. But to think about Netanyahu as a delegate of some international, very fascist and very religious crusade would mean that maybe now we have a better basis of joining forces. Because against such a crazy crusade, maybe it's time that Jews and Arabs join forces against that messianic power. So that it's not very hopeful because it needs a lot of work, but it's a way to look at it. Also, I just want to mention that we always take Ben Gvir as a poster boy of the fascism in Israel, and I would much rather put Smotrich there, Bezalel Smotrich, because most of that...
No, not Ben Gvir, but this is up to you.
No, of course, but when you want to say, oh, he's so violent, he's out there being violent, I would rather take Smotrich because most of that settler violence and zeal for making Israel a religious, and by the way, I think that Bibi was promised kingdom. That's why he's so because if there's going to be a religious Jewish state, we'd need a king, and I think he was promised kingdom, and that's why he's going all first with it. But Smotrich is a much more real representative of the group that he comes from, because they're mostly Ashkenazim. They're very much affected by American Jewish religious Orthodox ideology that is very much influenced by evangelical zeal. So that would be a more, I think, appropriate poster boy for the Orthodox Zionism today. Maybe I can continue later.
Want me to react?
Yeah, please.
Oh, good. Thank you. I will make it shortly. I didn't say that Netanyahu is the leader of the Jewish people. I say that he's seeking to be the leader. I'm not sure. I mean, I know that I have arguments with my friends because I think that Zionism is a failed idea, but this is my idea. I mean, okay, I'll go back. I didn't say that Netanyahu is the leader of the Jewish people. I said he's seeking to be the leader of the Jewish people. I'm sure that he will not succeed. At least partially he will succeed, but not for all. And I have an arguments with the Israeli scholars and Arab scholars that keep saying that the main agenda is to work against Zionism. I said Zionism is very important idea that invented by Herzl and others in Europe, this European idea, but it wasn't a big, as we want to think, as Netanyahu wants us to think, it wasn't a big success. I mean, the majority of American Jewry, they are not Zionist. They sympathizers to Israel. They support Israel, but they are not part of the Jewish national project. They are ready to give dollars for it and not to give their life. So this is very important. And half of Jews, Americans, are non-Zionist, or many of them anti-Zionist. So you really need to remember that this was the most important thing. This is the book that I wrote. It's not a book, an article that I wrote before a few years. I think that the most important national reference, national group reference, is the Israeli Jewish group. There is a new entity that called, in my view, Jewish Israelis, and they share the same conscience as being Jewish Israelis, and they are different than the majority of other Jews in the world. So this is very important to remember. And secondly, I agree with you. I mean, there is no left in Israel in the pure meaning that you know it. I mean, as I said, compared to the right, there is a camp that called central leftist in Israel, in Israeli terms, which is related to the ability, to the being ready to make compromise with the Palestinians, and not to any other case. The most social leader in Israel lately is Netanyahu. He keeps distributing money for the poor people, for Corona, for other reasons. I mean, he's knowing how to get people support him. So he's also, in this regard, much social than the Israeli left, as we know. And I can argue with you about the power of the Likud and the right wing. I think it's not a settler movement only. I mean, settlers are very important to the right, and they are right-wing politics. But Israeli right, I mean, if you go to Beit Shan or to Afula, you will see that 80% voted for the Likud, and for, of course, and I made it. I made the check for Shas and the Likud. Yes, 80%. This is right-wing politics. And you have to remember that. So it is not only the settlers. And this is why I'm claiming that the Likud is the party that represents the Israeli people. I mean, represent different segments of the community. As Mapai in the 50s and the 60s, I know that this was by controlling Arabs and Mizrahim. I know that. But now the Likud is much more with democratic support, which is more dangerous than so. This is true, and I'm aware of Judaization efforts in Lud, in Akka, in Haifa, etc., which is very dangerous. But this is part of the whole Israeli atmosphere and the change and leaning towards the right. And I'm aware to the connection between the Evangelicans and American money that goes to the settlers and the supporters of the right wing. But this is not the only explanation. I mean, there are people ready to take the money in order to promote the change back in Israel. So this is very important. This is not only one side direction. Netanyahu is one important figure for the new right in the world. He's one of the promoters. He's not only affected by others. He's one of the leaders of the new way of thinking in behalf of populism and right-wing politics, and will make him much more important than we expected. I'm going to write this a book because I'm going also to explain how Netanyahu not only he just put aside the option of two-state solution, but he proved that he can make peace with the Arab world without solving the Palestinian problem. That's true. This is what an achievement. Yeah. And he is making coalition between United States, Russia, India, and China, and the European Union voting for Israel in the last General Assembly in the UN. So Palestinians, they achieved like 60% of support for the idea to be declared as a state. In the 80s, 90%, 95% of the world states support Palestinian stand. Now there are very important states, almost 30 members of the UN General Assembly, they voted in support of the Israeli idea. So this is very important achievement for Israel. It's not complete defeat of the Palestinians, but it's still very important achievement, although I'm not counting very much in the UN power. Sorry.
If we have time, I want to talk a little about that idea of being a social leader and the way that you gain power through using social support and where you give social support and where you don't. But I want to leave some time for questions. Yes. Can you just say your name? Or
They are going to bring you the mic.
I'm Mark Tesler. If this question is too far afield, just say it's a talk for another time. But I'd like to hear about the half, and I think it probably is just about half, of the Israeli population, Israeli Jewish population, that is not part of this right-wing bloc or this dominant bloc. Okay. I think they're there. I have some ideas. I might toss out one or two ideas, but is there a meaningful counterweight to what's happening now? The election that just took place, of course, I think it was number 5. So there was obviously a lot of people who were on the other side. And what happened to them? Well, maybe they lost credibility because they ended up doing these attacks against Arab targets.
Okay, no, but don't answer. We'll try to answer.
Okay. Well, I'll put in one thing then, and I'll stop. Okay. I think that they have been led to the conclusion that they do not have a partner for negotiations, and I think it's the leadership of labor that has led them in that direction. Mm-hmm. Okay. speak.
Shall we gather some questions?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. You'll remember? We'll do 3. Okay.
If I don't remember, I will ask Mark to
Yeah.
repeat.
Hi. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm Shachar Pinsker. I teach in Middle East Studies and Judaic Studies, and I think, there's lots of questions and lots of issues that you raised, but there was something interesting among what Asad said and what Yali said that I wanted to ask about and maybe think about. And that has to do with American Jews and Israeli Jews and these kind of changes that happen and the interaction between the two communities. And there were some differences between both of you and how you read it. But I think one place that both of you didn't talk about so much, and I think is really important, is the ultra-Orthodox, the changed alliance in the last, 20 years or so, and why that happened, right? Asad, you mentioned that, they used to be kind of aligned with Mapai, and they used to be really worrying about their own community, so they could go to one camp or another. And recently, they're like, no, they became more national. And that kind of mirrors also a change that happened that my colleagues who are doing a really interesting work on American ultra-Orthodox Jews, they also say that the nature of the community changed. It's much more nationalistic, right-wing, and that also explains something that happened. And I don't know where it's going to go in the future, but I think it's an important point because demographically they are growing in Israel and in the United States.
I have to stop you. More questions? Yes, but just try to be brief about it so that we'll have
I will
time for
try.
answers.
Yes, thank you, Asad. Thank you, Ali. Asad and I had some discussions about the presentation before that, and I missed the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room, as I told you before, is the settler colonial project of Israel. And if you consider it, sorry?
No, go on.
And if you consider the settler colonial project of Israel-Palestine by Israel and the Jews, then we don't have something new about Netanyahu. Netanyahunism, it's a fascinating term, of course, but it's not new. It just continue what used to be the main project of Zionism and later on of Israel, which is the colonizing of Israel-Palestine. And in this sense, Jews took part as victims of all the phases of this project. The Mizrahim in the 1950s, for your question, Shachar. Yes. The ultra-Orthodox, which became settlers by themselves from the 1970s and 1980s onward. And now, against the people who are trying to make it slower and less violence colonization, that means the media, the court, academia, and so forth. So this is another perspective that said we are in the same business, of settler colonialism. What would you say?
Thank you. Now for the women in the room. We'll wait. Thank you.
I'm a student from the International and Regional Studies program. I'm Zhan Yang. And I do have a question about the strategy. I would call it strategy did by Bibi Netanyahu, because do you consider that it is a it is a strategy that in one term strengthen his own power and strengthens his own power within the party and also in Israel, whereas on the contrary, it also damaged the credits of the whole party, and which damaged the foundation for the credits that the party gains as a Likud in the longer term, because there are many protests ongoing in Israeli universities and also on the streets that people are walking on the streets to go against the Likud party and the new government, the new adjustments to the judicial system. And I wonder.
Thank you. More women in the room. No, sometimes it takes more time. Okay. So we go for the answers, and then maybe if we have time, we'll have another round.
Yeah. Aris, I do agree with you that this is a continuous settler colonial project. And you know from my writing that is true. But saying that Likud and the new situation in Israel is the same as it happened in the 70s and the 80s, I don't agree with you. I mean, at least as the reference of the analysis, the framework of analysis. As you know, I struggled for, and not only me, many others, struggles to say that the frame of analysis should be Palestine or Eretz Israel and not only Israel. And we get rejected by the vast majority of those who work, scholars who work in Israel and Palestine, including my friends, including many of them until today. They refer to Israel as Israel pre-67, although Benjamin Netanyahu, who is in charge, and he will decide where is the border, not me, not you, not our colleagues. So Netanyahu helps us clearly, and it is not by accident. There's a new wave of writings about the one-state reality. As I said, I started saying this in '96 in an article in Israel-Palestine Journal, but nobody listened to me. Now, there's a new generation of many important scholars like Ian Lustig and many others that came to this conclusion. I struggled with Ian Lustig for many years to convince him that there is no place for two-state solution, and he refused. Now he's coming because of Benjamin Netanyahu, not because of me. So this is very important. And I think that's very important. The elites in Israel are afraid of Benjamin Netanyahu project. This is not the same for the judiciary, for Ahron Barak, and for the Israeli Supreme Court, for the Israeli media. It's not the same. It's a new game. This is why I think that it is a new reality in Israel. It's very dangerous. I mean, people who think that this is the same as the 70s, they don't understand what is the meaning of Ben Gvir, although Netanyahu is the architecture. But what is the meaning of Ben Gvir and Smotrich in power in Israel? They are racist. They are racist in the very extreme meaning of racism. And they can conduct, and you look, I mean, this is going to come. I mean, will take some time, unfortunately, but will come. And you will see what is going in Jerusalem, what is going in the West Bank, what is going for Bedouins in the Naqab. You will be back in the Naqab, and you will see by yourself what's going on. So things are, I think, I mean, the situation is very bad, but we are going to have much worse situation, at least for the victims, the Palestinians, but also for many Jews. And it will come for me and for you. Don't worry, it will come. So this is very important. And I am saying this because this group are very serious. They get the money, and they keep their eyes for everyone who's against them. Here in America and Israel and elsewhere. So just be careful that they will come up to us. And I think that this is very important. And this is why I think that gives the legitimacy to argue that this is a new phase in Israel history. And I'm going to write a book. Otherwise, I will not write a book, as you know, about something like this. The second thing, you see, Mark, if we count only Jews, the Israeli right won 2/3, more than 2/3 of the Israeli public. More than 2/3, almost 75% more. I mean, if you count only Jews. So at least 1/3 of Israeli citizens, not counting Palestinians in the West Bank, they are the Palestinians in Israel. And they are excluded from Israeli agenda. Ayman Audi was refused to get involved in a meeting of the opposition meeting in the Knesset after Netanyahu bring his coalition to the Knesset. So we are being refused by the Israeli public. Why is that? Because the Israeli public, the majority, I know that there are certain people here and there, the majority, they are committed to the Jewish state agenda. The Israel left. What you said, they are not left. I mean, I know that they are left. I'm trying to make, sorry, the so-called left. What is the agenda of the protesters in Tel Aviv? They want to keep the situation today. I mean, they want to keep the Supreme Court as today. For example, Supreme Court was very bad for Arabs. Till today, the so liberal was very bad for Palestinians in the West Bank. He gave license to destroy Arab places, houses. I cannot be there. I wrote something in the Arts. I cannot be part of this. But my question, why Palestinians separately, they don't have their own demonstrations in Haifa, not in Tel Aviv, who are not part of the leftist agenda. And I mean by also international agenda. I think that without convincing the people, and bringing the conventions, not only convinces the people in the United States, but also bring this to decision making, we are not going to win. I'm sorry to say that, but we are very weak as Palestinians and those who support Palestinians among the Israeli Jews. And the whole situation in Israel, as I said before, if you look into the Israeli political map, there is no another leader who can compete with Netanyahu. This guy, the TV guy, Yair Lapid, he can real competitor to Netanyahu. And the historical development, as Shahar said, that the right-wing groups, those who are leaned to the right, they are becoming demographically more and more. So you are not going to win this election without Palestinians, without incorporating Palestinians. If you want to incorporate Palestinians to the struggle, you should take into consideration their views, not only as voters for what called the left, but seriously to take them into consideration. And this is not the situation in Israel. So we are in very bad situation. And I'm not putting to, as you know, I published a book with your support. We met in 2006 in South Africa, and I gave a lecture about the Palestinian nationalism as a failed national movement, and he convinced me to write a book, and I wrote a book that was published by Indiana University Press. So I know that Palestinians are very weak, and Palestinians in Israel are weak. They don't have real leader. They don't have. Why not promoting a big demonstration in Haifa? Why not having 3,000-4,000 Palestinian flag in Haifa? Let Ben Gvir take us all to the president. There is no enough president in Israel to hold us all. So this is very important to make civil obedience, to make civil struggle against. And this is the moment. This is the right moment. Netanyahu is not going to give up, as many people think. He's going to continue and implement his plan despite the demonstrators in Tel Aviv. And he's going to win, unfortunately. But without Palestinians in the middle or part of the struggle. And this is the question.
If you want to address more of the questions that we
Shahar,
ask, you need
the
to.
question of the religious, I know that's from other friends that work, like Ami Bedatsur, who work in the Israeli public. He kept warning me before two decades that this group of supporters for this camp are in the public, in the ordinary people. They are moving towards the right. So this is why Shas cannot continue to have the same views like in the 90s. So they want to follow their followers. And this is related to identity politics. People afraid about their own identity in the new world with the media, etc., etc. This brings them back. There are other reasons behind that. But this is one reason why people want to look for somebody that can be trusted as the promoter of their agenda in the public sphere. And Netanyahu deliver because his personal interest, but maybe because he's also, I don't know if he's conservative. He's not really conservative, but he wants his. I'm not saying that Netanyahu is a pure ideological. He's a politician, like every politician. He wants to look for his interest and to stay in power as long as possible. And of course, because of his trail, he's in court. He wants to get, he wants to lehimalate, to get out, from this trail. So this is also many reasons why they are making this alliance with the right wing in Israel. And demographically, this is not good news for Israeli in the Israeli terms, liberals. This is not good news.
If I may comment on some of the questions, when you ask about the other half of the Jewish people, I think Israeli liberals have the same problem that liberals have around the Western world. They're completely convinced that they have no privilege. And Aaron Barak just was on television saying that I have a privilege, I'm the second Israel. And as such, they're completely unable to see themselves as a sector and to see liberal governments as sectorial. And so their whole discussion is kind of an inner discussion that, and you can see that in the protests right now, they're successful because they're funded and because there is a lot of financial interest in promoting those protests, and a minority in these protests is actually left-wing, which is very good, but there's such a minority in this group that every time someone puts out a Palestinian flag in the demonstration, he's almost hit. It's very difficult to be actually left in those protests. So, and that's why it's also difficult for Palestinians, like you said, and for many of the Mizrahim to go and support the court right now, because the court traditionally has not been a friend of the abject poor or of Mizrahim who claimed for Mizrahi identity or for Palestinians. So it's very easy for a leader like Netanyahu to use those discontents and embody them and be the face of the supposed protest of those who are not happy with liberals, who even now, after such amazing work that has been done in activism and in research, are not really able to take a look at the mirror and say, there's a problem with our politics. About the ultra-Orthodox, there's been an immense shift to the right for many reasons, I think. One is that Palestinian land was given to Haredim, and it became the affordable housing and the way to, and after a while, when you live there, it becomes your ideology. You suddenly become invested in the idea of owning that land and being secured against the enemy and beginning to speak that language. But also because there's been a Hasidic movement. Chabad has gone to the right, and it is very powerful in funds and in ideology. It's very right-wing, and it's very American-based. And also Breslev, some sects of the Breslev have gone very right-wing. So the Hasidic trends in Jewish Orthodoxy, but I think you are right that we should think about Haredim and about the Jewish identity of Haredim as a political power that can maybe counter that power, because up until now, Haredim would say, no, the Reform Jews in the United States are not important because they're not really Jews, they've Christianized. But now that a Jewish leader in the Israeli state is saying, I'm not having any conversation with them, they're not important at all, and we're gonna cut them off, maybe that's a point in time when they can think, really, do we wanna do that? Like, do we want so many Jews not to be Jewish according to our leader? So maybe that's a point of entrance that may stir some conversation. But maybe another idea is that Palestinian and Jewish diasporas will kind of form a shadow government.
At least I want them just to coordinate a meeting, have one demonstration together. This is what I dream of. Not
But we're from the
government.
Middle East, we're
But
always
you
late.
You are right. I mean, Israel is, it's not only Israel, the whole world going global. I think there is no, you can make your contribution. I mean, everyone can make a contribution from abroad. And I think that is what I claim, that it is time, at least from my point of view, for Palestinians to create, to try and to build a new agenda and a new way of struggle that can compete with this Israeli. I'm not sure historically that the right wing will win. I don't know, because first of all, I don't know the future. But secondly, it might be the moment where, in one moment, Palestinians would wake up and say, okay, if that's the struggle over the decolonization of Palestine, let's just change our agenda. We are not interested anymore for the two states. I mean, the elites, Palestinian elites still today, contrary to my point of view, they support the two-state solution. I mean, they still believe, I mean, yes, in the West Bank and Gaza, where is the core Palestinian politics, the majority, the vast majority, still support the idea. And the Palestinians in Israel, all Arab parties in Israel, they support the idea of two-state solution, officially. So this is very sad, because there is no an option. There is no such an option at all. So you cannot be a politician supporting something that cannot happen at all. But this is tragedy of Palestinian struggle. This is time to get to work, to build a new agenda, and really to get engaged in decolonization of Palestine, Israel. And we have, of course, we have to come up with a clear idea about what is the meaning of this, and how do you refer to Israeli Jews. You cannot ignore the fact that there is a group of people that deserve self-determination in Palestine there, which is called the Jews, not only the Palestinians, of course. Yes.
I wanted, to address your question about are they kind of giving a bad name to Likud or discrediting Likud? I don't think it's a problem for Netanyahu or for central people in the Likud party, because the rhetoric is exactly meant to use that as fuel. So anytime you have an objection from that side, they would say, this is not Jewish. You're not being Jewish enough. You're not being loyal enough. You're talking in this kind of... There are even videos of when they speak, for example, about the court, and you have these videos by settlers, and they're explaining what's the problem with the court. And they're explaining that the court is really the continuation of the foreign rule over Israel. So this is like the Yevanim, and that's the way it is perceived. So every time you put on some kind of an idea, it is very easy to attack it when you have that language. So the rhetoric is really powerful. So we need to finish in like a minute. Do you want to give a concluding remark? Like everyone is really depressed and kind of preparing the... Just say that it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
Don't worry, it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay in Michigan. And I think that things going to be worsen and very in the very negative direction, at least for a while. I don't know what will happen in 20 years.
Global warming will kill us.
And I think that it can be a perilous victory for Netanyahu. I'm active in Palestinian circles of intellectuals that think that Netanyahu. I'll say something else. I wrote an article in Ars before 3 years. I don't know if you say it. I told, thank you, Netanyahu, when he issued the Israeli national law, the national state law. It is an article, you can choose it in the Haaretz. And I said, Netanyahu can bring potentially Palestinians together, because he says there is no difference between Palestinians and Israel, who are Israeli citizens in this, according to this law, and Palestinians in the West Bank, and Palestinians maybe in the diaspora and in the refugee camps. And this will bring Palestinians together. So as you know, I'm in politics. Politics cannot be by itself, needs agents to work. And I think Palestinian agents are very weak now, but it will be changed. I keep facing a new generation of Palestinians here, including here in Michigan, very active, very smart. People wants to make a change, to contribute, and in different way. They don't. I mean, my daughter, she's in New York. She doesn't confront the Jewish-Israeli conflict in as me. I mean, as in direct. She said, this is the wrong way. Let's go and make Palestinian cultural events. Let's go and do. It might be their way. And I know that my generation was a failure. I hope that this generation at least will be much more successful than us in order to promote a change, including in the Jewish sector, not only in the Arab sector. And I hope that will be at the end, it might be a warning that we could have much more normal life for Palestinians and Israelis in this land, and not only for one side of the conflict. This is at least I wish, and I think that there are certain powers in the new generation of Palestinians and Jews that really can carry this new dream, and there is no other way. I mean, there is other ways, but I hope that this is the way that would win for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ghanem, for your analysis and your vision. Thank you so much for being patient and listening attentively and asking questions. See you later.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Natasha.